Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of an App Protocol Tech Talk. My name is Boris Mann. I'm in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and we have Tom Sherman as our first guest from Norwich, England, and he is going to be walking us through his building of Frontpage, a link aggregator built on App Protocol. And with that, I will hand it off to Tom. Take it away.
Cool. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. Um, yeah, I'm Tom. I'm a software engineer. And yeah, over the past kind of, I don't know how long it's been now, a few months, been building this thing with a few friends. I think they're on the call. Jake's here, and I think Tim and Damien here too. Um, we've been kind of, I guess, early adopters on at Proto, building this app. But like, what I wanted to present today was this journey of like wanting to build an app and then um, wanting to kind of make it decentralized, really. Um, it's kind of oh yeah, Will's here too. um, it's kind of a rewriting of history because the reason we built this was more of a tech investigation than anything else. Like we didn't really start to build a centralized service and then change our minds, but I think it's interesting to present it that way as a kind of story of how you might the kind of thought process that you might go on. Because we built this to like be early adopters basically, but hopefully there'll be many more apps in the future that might want to make this same decision. Um, so yeah, Frontpage is a link aggregator. So right now it's kind of like Hacker News, where you post links, they go on to a feed, they get ranked, you can vote on them, and you can comment on them too, and you can vote on the comments. So it's quite a simple app right now. Um, and yeah, so like if we were to build this as a group, the group that I mentioned at the start and me, like we're kind of big on Next.js, we would probably decide to deploy this on a kind of platform like Vercel, so this serverless idea, because that's what we kind of do day to day. And in like a centralized fashion, it's quite a simple app, really, because we'd probably have this Next.js app sitting here that users interact with. They load the client, they look at the data on the screen, they send their post requests to the same app to do things like submit a link or vote. And then we'd have this like database that's maybe Postgres, and that's got different tables in. Like this is standard stuff. And we'd probably do this in a week, and then it would work, and it would be a nice Hacker News clone. But like 50 million Hacker News clones already exist, so maybe we can make it a little bit different. And also, um, it's like a nice. I think it's an interesting space to have this decentralized system where we can all we can all interact together, but we also own our data. I think that's very interesting. So how would we do that? How would we take this? Just imagine we built this system. How would we like start splitting it out into its constituent parts to make it decentralized? Um, so yeah, what would Frontpage look like if it was decentralized? How would we build it? Like what would we need to change? So maybe we would land on an architecture like this, where we now go on. I can't hear. I think you're muted.
We don't actually have a screen share from you.
Oh, really? That's
True.
interesting.
I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I can see it as well.
I can see
Okay,
the screen share
good.
as well, yeah.
Maybe the view
Over
covering the
here on my
bottom of
second
the screen.
screen. Never mind. I will learn how to use Zoom for our next call. Continue. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. I thought it was a classic Mac OS issue of
Nope,
like
nope. Skill
cool.
issue on my part. All good.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so like if we wanted to make it decentralized, maybe an idea that we would have would be that we kind of design this piece over here that over here, which is like this little piece that a user can own and host their own data over here. And we would for rights, that's where all the rights would go to for the user, and the user would they would still read from our application over here. But like if they wanted to create a new post, they would put that into their little, maybe it's on their phone, maybe they would save it to their phone and it would like kind of sync to this system in the background, or maybe it's like a server that they host themselves or somebody else hosts. But the point is, like, they would have their own dedicated little space to save things to, and they get aggregated. And so we still live like in the ether, consuming these things over here on this post request. Because remember, also we want to do this on, for example, Vercel, which is this serverless thing. So we need to use HTTP to kind of like get things pushed to us. Yeah, so the user would kind of like interact with this API server down here. Data would go here. It would go in a queue. It would eventually like propagate to us. And to do that, we would have to build some sort of. We have to build this. We would have to define this. Like, what does maybe there's a protocol here or some sort of API that people would follow. This is fine. This is what we had before. Like, this is just somebody accessing our app, this part here. But we'd have to define some protocol here. And I imagine you can like know where this is going. Like, we know this thing called atproto that kind of defines these parts already. I'm not going to go into like all the details here, but like the atproto allows us to do this. So the big like realization is that this piece that we maybe want to distribute to users and let them run themselves is in atproto terms a personal data server. And so the cool thing here is that we don't have to build this because it's already been built by the Bluesky team, which is great. And they host a bunch of these, but you could host them yourselves. And then maybe there's services in the future that can host these for you. It's a place that hosts your data. And it also knows how to get that data out into the world as well, which is great because we are in the background here. We need to know about that at some point. So yeah, I'll just collapse these boxes down. So we just have this kind of abstract component now called a PDS. And what it knows to do, it knows to take something that the user wants to write to their data server, and it knows how to publish it into the world. So the other piece that we have here in our architecture is like an app view, which is this other atproto component, which is something that knows how to listen to these data servers and do aggregation. So we collapse that down as well, and we kind of have this like it's a simple box now. That means it's better because less lines on the diagram are always better. The idea, what I'm trying to convey here is that like we have now a standardized way to represent this that other people can take advantage of, and we're not inventing everything ourselves because we're following a protocol that already exists. I'm really rattling through these slides, so we're probably going to be done way early, but hopefully there'll be tons of questions at the end. So we move on to this, the actual weeds of how we would do this, because there's a contentious part here about what we want to do as like personally the people that are working on Frontpage, we want to deploy in a serverless manner. And so what that would mean is that like before we were taking HTTP kind of webhook post requests here. But that's kind of incompatible with how atproto work. If you've looked at how the protocol works under the hood, this is not how it works. What actually happens here is, and do I show this on the next slide? Kind of, but these are actually WebSockets. And if you know anything about kind of serverless, is that serverless does not do WebSockets very well. And this is a big issue. There's a few providers that help. So Cloudflare are pretty good at doing WebSockets, but kind of the mainstream serverless stuff doesn't do it well. So that's one of the problems that we have with having that architecture with the tech decisions that we want to make. Maybe we could change those tech decisions, by the way, which would make some lives easier in certain ways, but we don't want to do that. So that's one of the problems is WebSockets. The other one is that there's many of them. if we have millions of users, which maybe we will one day, like Bluesky, or maybe we'll have more, we would have millions of WebSockets connecting to us, which is, I think ideally we'd want to avoid that. So like if users are on this left-hand side, like down here, and they're posting to their data servers, we have a WebSocket per user coming out. How do we handle that, and how do we also rectify this problem of we don't know how to speak WebSockets? So the first thing that we can introduce here is this idea of a relay. So this is a Bluesky or atproto type construction here, where the relay will take all the WebSockets and output them into a single, what's called a fire hose of data. So we take many WebSockets, one per user, and we just have one that we can subscribe to, which is quite nice. This means the relay does a nice job of discovering all of these users and their data, and it also can do extra goodies like that are kind of critical to the protocol, like kind of verifying the data, making sure it's secure, and that it's from the person that we think it's from. And then, so what an application can do, it can sit on this side and kind of just consume everything. But like the problem again is that we don't know how to speak WebSockets. We still haven't solved that. And also the problem is that as a fledgling atproto application, we don't care about 99.9% of the messages over this channel. Like we actually only care about maybe one one message every day right now, potentially. So like how do we solve that as well? So what we have done, and maybe there are other solutions to this, but we've come up with this idea of a.
And Tom, I'll just actually ask a clarifying question from there. We're definitely always going to have a pretty atproto heavy audience, but I'll like chime in for a couple of things. So let's dig into that whole like, but wait, I don't care about all these messages. So Bluesky has defined a microblogging lexicon, which is how you define data in atproto. And Frontpage has a different type of front page messages. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good prod. Yeah, so user is on the left-hand side here doing various different things. So, and for example, they are creating Bluesky posts, or they are interacting with other applications that are hosted on the network. Imagine if there was one way to subscribe to every change that was published on HTTP, and that's all the applications on the internet. We obviously only care about our ones. So we want to filter out everything and just kind of get to the parts that we want. This is a good thing for the goals of the protocol to be kind of public and open, and the users get the benefits of having their own data on the left hand side here. But for us application developers, we need a way to filter through the noise. There's an interesting like scale dynamic as well here. Like the more messages that you actually care about, the less this problem goes away. And also we would then maybe want to revisit this serverless thing, because maybe we're basically always on, and we have this kind of stable traffic that is coming into us that can only grow so much in a certain time span. So we kind of we've kind of bridged the gap here with this this thing that we've put in the middle that we've called drain pipe, which is not serverless, not unversel. It's kind of just a filter that sits in front of the relay. It takes the WebSocket from the relay and drops all the messages we don't care about. So all the Bluesky posts, all of the Bluesky likes, everything like that, takes it from the WebSocket. And then for the messages that we do care about, so front page links, front page comments, front page votes, it will forward those on via kind of a webhook type thing to the front page app view, which is, if you remember before, just a post route that we have hosted in our application. So this is like a persistent piece of infrastructure. We've kind of built this in Rust. It's also open source if you wanted to take a look at it. It runs on fly.io. So it's kind of this Docker container that just, well, it's not really a Docker container, but we build it as a Docker container. Fly then runs it. And that's actually very cheap to do as well. It's just kind of a bit annoying, and I wish like maybe the relay could be a bit smarter and can maybe do a bit of this for us. Although we still have this kind of translation layer that we would have to figure out. Maybe the relay could do the filtering. And part of like @proto is that there can be separate relays that exist in the world. There doesn't have to be one. So a competitor relay could exist that has these extra features, which would be pretty cool. But for now, we have Drainpipe, which filters things for us. Yeah, so that's like kind of the whole architecture of a Frontpage in like a few slides. I'll just go back to what we have, which is like this. There is obviously there's an implicit relay kind of on these corners that's forwarding us. The PDS doesn't talk to us directly, but this is what we kind of end up with. There are problems we still have though, which is kind of what I'm going to go into next, that we haven't solved yet, but we plan to solve them. So the problem that we have in like the prod application right now is that, and this would happen, I think this is kind of a natural thing to happen if you're building on this architecture, which is this read after write lag. So I'm just going to check if I've got no. So in here, if we remember, there's a database in here, and the problem we have is that writes go through this PDS, they propagate to us, we get them, but the reads happen kind of asynchronously. So if we read, for example, if you create a post on Frontpage right now and you go to the post straight away, it won't actually exist in the application because we're essentially waiting for the network to be consistent. And I think there are like various ways we could solve this. Like we could do some fancy stuff like right next to the user, perhaps, where we do some optimistic updates at this level. So we kind of tell the user that the post already exists when in reality it doesn't. But I think what we're leaning on is essentially doing two writes, which is we would write to @proto over here. So this is kind of the canonical write. But we would also write directly to Frontpage. So Frontpage immediately gets the new post, for example, or the vote or the comment, which means that if a read comes in straight away, we obviously know how to, we can just serve it. And then then we have to deal with the write that comes in later, and I'm not really kind of sure how to do that. This is we haven't started working on this yet. Maybe we just kind of do a bit of checking. We make sure that it make sure it's consistent, or maybe we have to do a rollback. Not entirely sure. So if you got anybody's got any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear them. Or I think there's also some things you can do at the PDS level, or at least maybe Bluesky does this right now at the PDS level. Although I'm pretty sure there's plans to change that as well. So we have to figure out a solution for this, and I'm not really sure what's best yet, but I'm pretty sure it involves optimistic writes. So that's like a bug that we want to solve that hopefully we'll solve soon. Or you'll just kind of like, if you go on Frontpage and create a post, you just maybe hit with a 404 that you have to wait a little while. The other thing that we're interested in is we've kind of built a Hacker News clone, but what if we wanted to be a Reddit clone, like, and have subreddits, subpages, communities, whatever you want to call them? What would that look like in a decentralized system? I think it's interesting to think about Reddit in a way that it's not decentralized, but it's kind of certain things are delegated to moderators, for example, and those moderators get a certain control over the experience of the people that exist in that community. The same thing kind of applies to maybe if you're an admin on a Discord, for example. You have some responsibility there to like kind of grow your community and cater for them and deal with support requests, for example, if things are broken. And I think that's like a perfect fit for a properly decentralized system, because you then don't have to worry about the system, the centralized system above you, kind of maybe rug pulling something, a feature that you're using, or you can be properly owning that community, basically. So thinking about like what a community looks like in this in Frontpage or in atproto, and we think it means a way to do moderation that's self-contained. We think it means we have a dedicated feed, and also we have some personalization in there. So you can personalize the community by kind of changing the look and feel, or you can maybe personalize the creation of a post flow, or like the sign up flow or something. Maybe you have to subscribe to a Patreon to get into the community, that kind of thing. So we think right now there are potentially two ways that we could do this. The first one being this like many app views approach, where we would essentially just duplicate the application. Maybe not literally, but like in theory, where we would have many front pages that exist and posts go into one front page. And then maybe we also have the like overall the actual front page that aggregates everything together, but really posts live in a kind of a scoped in atprotocol terms, maybe it'd be a scoped lexicon, for example. So it wouldn't be a specific front page post, it would be a post that for your specific community. So that's one thing we're thinking of. Maybe we could do that. But we also think there's maybe another way where we could have this separate piece of the architecture where we have the single app view, but with many feeds. And I think there's some like philosophical differences about how these things work. Like when you create a post or a link or a comment as a user, are you creating it in the context of a community, or are you creating it in the context of like front page itself? And then there's obviously all of the kind of technical differences between these two things and how we might implement them. But what's cool is that this is a piece of architecture that already exists in the Bluesky land, so we could potentially take some inspiration from that. Because in Bluesky, this is the thing that powers, for example, custom algorithms and custom feeds. This doesn't really get close to describing how we would do moderation in this system, but maybe we could figure it out. This is also very early days, like how we're not sure how to do this right now.
And I think there's sort of a different phrase here, especially when you talk community, is curation versus moderation. In some ways, those are two aspects of the same thing. Although moderation usually is this is bad, and curation is more the reverse. This is good, or maybe this piece of content is not quite a fit for what we're trying to do here. Subtle, right, but goes directly to this.
Definitely, yeah. And there's a lot of the moderation flows that exist on Bluesky right now would kind of, you pull them directly in, but there's that piece of this is off topic basically, and we want to either like derank this or we want to remove it completely. And you would need kind of UX flows for like reporting things as off topic. And it is in effect the same as moderating because something's bad, but it's a different thing that you're doing, right? So yeah, that's communities. Very rough idea right now that we're trying to figure out. The other thing that we're kind of more that we have more concrete views on how we would do is this idea of Bluesky mirroring, we're calling it, which is when you create a post on Frontpage, it exists on Frontpage right now, but you're creating it in the context of an app proto identity that could also be bridged essentially to Bluesky. Yeah, go on.
I mean, technically, it exists in the user's delegated PDS, and it is viewable through Frontpage.
Right, yeah, that's a good distinction. We're listening to those creations of from Frontpage specifically as well, but we could also kind of listen to things happening on Bluesky related to Frontpage posts. There's a bunch of things to figure out here about like what we'd call on the web like the canonical link, and which one is kind of the home of a link. So if you post a link on Frontpage and it gets kind of cross-posted to Bluesky somehow, which one is the true home of that link? But we think we know how to do this, where the big idea being you post on Frontpage, it shows up in Bluesky and vice versa, basically. Either that happens via duplicating a post to Bluesky from Frontpage, or if that happens via kind of embedding essentially a Bluesky client into Frontpage itself. We think we're leaning on the former, because I saw a tweet from a Bluesky team member who I've forgotten who it was now, who said this is probably a good idea, to kind of duplicate cross-post things into Bluesky, because the formats are different.
I put the link in the chat, so
yeah. I think the formats are different, right? You can see that the Frontpage post is kind of, we have a link, we have a title, but we need to kind of transform it into what would be a microblog post. We can obviously we can link these, and we can make sure that in a decentralized way anybody can link these, so it's not just us that can link them, and then we can kind of have this bridge between the two, which would be pretty cool, because if you liked something over here, like it would show up over here, which I think would be a nice demo of the true kind of decentralization power of that proto. And yeah, finally, we have some other planned stuff. So we have OAuth in flight. So for context, Bluesky applications up until very, very recently had a very kind of complicated UX story in authenticating with your account. But now we can do these nice OAuth flows, which we're currently implementing. We're about half done in this. We've got a bunch of edge cases to clean up. And thank you. I think Nick's on the call, and Nick was like super helpful. And I think he has a talk coming up maybe next week, which you should all go to as well. He's been helpful with this. The other thing we have in flight is rich text. We are going to steal a lot of what Bluesky has done in rich text, but we want to do more with rich text as well, because we have 10,000 characters to play with right now, and so we want to be able to support more longer form content, which I think necessitates being able to do more with rich text. Then after that, we'll be looking at things like notifications, which I think is very an underrated, maybe not underrated to people on this call, but I think underrated to a lot of people in actually getting adoption of your application. In that, if you go onto Frontpage and create a link right now, somebody comments, that's brilliant. Like, that's a really great thing that someone's commented on your post, but you don't know about it. And I really don't understand how people start contributing to Hacker News, because I'm pretty sure there's no kind of notifications on there either. And that just kind of baffles me. I guess it's just kind of got to a place now where people just expect that kind of thing. But I think for this is table stakes for any new application, basically, and we need to implement something like it. The other thing we're thinking about is if you create a link on Frontpage, right now it has to be a HTTP link. What if you could link to things on the @proto network directly? So instead of linking to a Bluesky representation of a post, a Bluesky post, what if we could link like to the actual thing itself? So the underlying object that exists in the network. I think that might be a solution to this kind of canonical problem, where we have duplicates and maybe we can merge them. I'm also envisioning this UI on Frontpage that could look like you have a link being discussed in many communities, and this way to kind of aggregate them all. And then then there's this like kind of simple one, which is like the ability to edit comments. We're a bit scared of doing it right now because there is nothing. I don't think there's many things on Bluesky that you can edit. Maybe the profile is maybe one thing, and so we're scared of lack of prior art and what to what footguns or kind of unknown unknowns will be in this. So we'll kind of kick that down the road for now, but we will come back to it.
Hilariously, I had the same reaction when I was using Nick's smoke signal, where I'm like, oh wait, I can update this event, which
Such a novel idea.
which I haven't been used to in @proto. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have this like right now we're in closed beta. So if you wanted to post a link into the atmosphere, you can by you have to DM us first because our moderation story is not good. So we have a specific allow list of people that can post into the app right now. So if you go onto Bluesky and DM this handle, we can add you to the allow list. And look, we have this amazing graph where we're like almost 30 users. This is going to be when we get to this milestone, we're going to be having drinks. Maybe we could do it after this call. That'd be great, wouldn't it? And yeah, thanks. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
Amazing. Claps, cheers, applause.
Woo!
Yeah, Tom, that was really, really great. Let's go into multi-user mode here. If you want to stop your screen share.
If I can figure out how to do that.
Come back to us in real life. Lauren's atmosphere is so not good in real life. Brian tried this in Vancouver and everyone's like, what are you saying?
We're going in, Boris. We're bought in. So
no.
Get on board, buddy.
Okay. What happens when the Bluesky team has been spending too much time with just themselves? Questions for Tom. And actually, Tom, I mean, come on, we should here, I'm gonna do a screen share. So that we can actually get a recording of what we're looking at here. So for those who haven't seen it, this is Frontpage. So from the chat, I took this is the Frontpage GitHub mono repo, where you can find these things. This is my Bluesky avatar, so I'm logged in with that. There's a bunch of things. You see Lawrence, who's on the call, has posted a ton of things on here. And I've upvoted a bunch of them here. Comment, I find it a little subtle to figure out which ones I have upvoted, which ones I have not. So maybe some design passes on some of this. And yeah, definitely encourage people to try it out. You can go in to a permalink, and so this is a page. Here's Dan, who's already left a comment, and apparently I can write 10,000 character comments, right? And entire mini novel in here, probably arguing about atmosphere memes. Also internecting, I guess, would be the other deep cut. And
I was too scared to do the demo. Thank you for that.
You didn't delete the database, as your team said. Amazing. Nick, go ahead, ask your question, please. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, what do you think about content deletion and how it should be managed in this sort of ecosystem? Because editing and deletion brings about a whole set of interesting problems, especially when you talk about it in the context of moderation, what is deleted versus shadow banned versus just hidden, etc.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think we need to figure out before going into like open access. So like the specific flows that we have right now is that we can moderate a post or a comment, which essentially hides it. On the post level, we actually keep the post around. We remove it from the feed, but the post still exists. And the justification for this was this is how Hacker News works, because like we're we're building a Hacker News clone. We haven't revisited that kind of assumption from the beginning, so maybe there's something else makes more sense. But for comments as well, if we moderate a comment, that just gets kind of hidden entirely. And you can't navigate to, or you can navigate to if it has got a thread, but if it hasn't got a thread, like kind of it's gone forever. But yeah, it's an interesting point, because we really want to balance removing the data entirely, but also keeping the conversation around, because especially this is more like related to if somebody deletes the content, I think, than if it gets moderated. But that I've been in situations before on forums where the thread gets deleted, but you really want that information to stick around. And really, does the owner of the post really have the ownership, or whatever the word you want to use, to actually remove that conversation from history? So I think ideally we'd want to keep the posts around in most situations, but there's definitely times where you'd remove them, right?
The
yeah.
Discourse community has some interesting prior art. So Discourse being a forum, this is not quite a forum, but especially if you go in the Reddit, it is more like that. Where basically if you have an account that has participated over a long period of time, you can't delete your content. You can just anonymize your account, because the shared conversation is assumed to be owned by the community. So again, some subtle things in there, but definitely interesting to think about. Yeah. Paul.
Hey. So first of all, it's really impressive that you managed to get as far as you did, given the state of the docs and things like that. So this is really cool, and really impressed that you got this far. And there's a couple of the things that I would definitely like to share some updates on that we're working on, but I'm going to save that for maybe towards the end so that we can kind of give some time for people to ask you questions. So my question, I think, to you right now would be, what parts of working with that proto did you find to be maybe easier than expected, and which parts are harder than expected?
The thing that immediately jumps to mind is it's a very familiar architecture for me. Like, when I'm not a decentralized web person, like I don't really understand how what Web3 is even. So I don't even own any crypto. So, and not that I dislike that stuff. I'm not being dismissive. I'm just not like, my head's not in that world. But I really like atproto is the thing that opened my mind up to the possibilities of this thing of decentralized web, basically. And I was quite surprised how familiar and easy it is to build on top of. If you're coming from a day job of kind of doing event sourcing, or with event-based backends and that kind of stuff, it's really similar to what I do on a day-to-day basis. So that was surprisingly easy, to be fair, to actually build on top of. But the to get there was actually quite difficult, because to see, and this is probably the big criticism I have, is that seeing how the big picture all fits together is quite tough right now. And if there, I think hopefully talks like this and other ones that are being organized will open this thing up to be more accessible. But we had to do a lot of kind of piecing things together, which once we're done, it was kind of smooth sailing, but to actually get that like initial jump was quite hard.
Yeah, I'm just
Cool.
saying in the
Good to know.
comments, we very much, especially this talk, we did not do at Proto 101. Mostly, my interest will in not doing at Proto 101, because a lot of that will ultimately need to be done by the at Proto community as a whole. So in some ways, but I think it'll be good to dive into that more and spread it to more people so that they can get started. Yeah. Timothy in the comments, we made our own wireframe of the architecture and still don't fully understand it. And yet it still works. Ryan, go ahead. Muted.
You're muted, Ryan. Yeah, must be on hardware because you don't show muted in Zoom.
Okay, different mic. Any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. First, congrats, Tom. This is awesome. I love seeing like actually new apps and lexicons on App Proto. You all, Whitewind, Smoke Signal is really cool. Like I'm nowhere near building an app view or anything, and so like you put together new parts of the protocol that I haven't touched yet. It's great to see. I also just wanted to commiserate with Bridgie Feather's serverless, and I ended up with a stateful box just like your drain pipe that does the exact same thing. It's the Firehose client that filters, and it's on my end, the PDS Firehose server, and it's just what you have to do. And so I think you did the right thing. I don't know that there's a better answer yet. And also, yeah, the filtering, it's interesting. Like on the one hand, I get the team's idea that that's a complicated thing for them to do. On the other hand, every new application will start from zero and get this fire hose that's big, and almost none of it is for them. I take heart in like you can end up doing it on not too much compute without trying too hard, but still, I just want to commiserate. Like you're hitting the same problems and using the right or same solutions as most of us, and so yeah, this all makes a lot of sense. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there's because we all land on the same solutions. I do think there's space for service providers here to like be relay as a service, for example. I think that's an interesting space for somebody to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I commented on this on Bluesky. So Farcaster has ended up very quickly with a commercial API provider because their architecture means that every single hub has to keep everything, and that was basically impossible for serverless people. I see the commercial service provider and that architecture to essentially be an anti-pattern, because it means in that architecture everybody has to keep a copy, which is kind of like Mastodon. Again, not exactly. So I think it's amazing if service providers naturally arise, and it's the same sort of thing that I would say to the Bluesky team: don't step into that hole. Step into patterns and architecture that people can self-host. Some of those people might then end up making a business out of it. But we do actually want to leave room for other service providers in the ecosystem. That's a nuance for me on ecosystem building, right? I really like, I'm super excited at all the proto apps that are rising and want to see more, but we need even larger organizations. So with that, it's actually a question that I had. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Unravel team. You made a few comments on you work together already and you work on a sort of, this is a technology exploration. Do you guys run an agency or a company? What's the context of you guys deciding to be early adopters here?
This is an interesting story. We don't work together really. We all live in the same area, and we're all software engineers. We all go to the same meetups. We're all mates basically. And this came about from we were exploring this idea of building a product. We were sort of exploring this idea of building a product that isn't obviously the product isn't a Hacker News clone. But it kind of has similar guts, and so the intention is to build this product that we want to build. But it's a side project, so who knows if this side project is going to get off the ground or not, basically. And we got into the into Frontpage by essentially we'll build this tech demo for this product that we want to build later, which would also be kind of on atproto as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
So, so Norwich area, like, so geographically local, is that in?
Yeah, which is like the tiniest micro developer community you've ever seen, basically. And I think Alex Scotton is on this call as well. He runs the local developer meetups. He's a legend. So
amazing. There's this guy Will I've heard about. I don't know if he's part of your team or what as well.
No idea.
I'll go into some other questions that were asked here. Nick, do you want to go ahead and ask your question again?
Oh, yeah. So I was wondering if you had done any thought, or if it was a bit early in the sort of cost analysis and like resource consumption of serverless versus server applications. As the network grows and as more and more stuff occurs, events like individual events are going to rack up, and relying on the queue, like the cursor mechanism to consume events, I think is going to be sort of important from a cost-effective rolling updates, regional distribution point of view. So I was wondering if you'd thought about that.
Yeah, we haven't thought about that too much, I don't think. What we have found is, like, from a cost perspective, consuming from the relay is super cheap. But the expensive part kind of comes, which is like the thing that we call drain pipe, but the expensive part obviously comes afterwards. I think we just, that's how we operate as like a group of developers that we are. We are kind of serverless people. So it was never a consideration from the beginning. It's probably something we would just kind of, if we ever had to make that decision, we would make the decision when we really have to, when our arms twisted by the $90,000 Vercel bill that comes through the door, or whatever it is. So
amazing. And I do I'd love to work with someone to break out your PDS on fly.io into a separate repo, because there are a ton of people that would like to do that PaaS style of hosting where they don't have to maintain the operating system. So would love to maybe have some dedicated time with some folks to break that out, because that would be lovely. Jenko, do you want to unmute, or do you want me to ask your question? I will ask.
Hi, sorry, I'll unmute. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, I was asking about what you think about the current centralization of atproto identities. Because I have a relay, and looking at my information, I can see that all but 36,000 of the identities are currently only controlled by the Bluesky PBC. And 24.8 thousand of the rest are also just PLC spam. So we have very little actually decentralized identity right now in atproto. And since centralization seems to be an issue for you, I was wondering if this is something you were considering.
This is something that our wireframe, the internal wireframe that we have of the architecture, that we keep coming back to. Like, if you can have layers that are decentralized, but there is potentially some parts that aren't as decentralized as some people would like, I guess. for us, like from a product perspective, the decentralized aspects that exist right now are enough, I think. That's like a very vague, like, what am I trying to say there? As a user, I think being able to have that idea where you own your front page posts and have that PDS is enough for us to meet the requirement of, we want to be a decentralized Hacker News clone that can't be controlled by a single entity. I personally don't have too many opinions on the kind of the PLC did stuff, but maybe others do.
I think I dropped a link to a video I did with Brian on plans on that. There are many rabbit holes around the words identity, decentralization, and keys. So I think that's probably something that we leave for another dedicated talk to dive into that, Genko. So I know that there's a lot of people who there are some Web3 people who are hesitant to adopt atproto because of the current PLC directory. It's also, as far as I know, the single largest install of DIDs in the world. So I'm like, I figure we'll get there.
Right. This wasn't even about the PLC directory, though. This is assuming that the PLC directory is successfully decentralized, then all of the identities, almost all of the identities, still belong to Bluesky PBC.
In terms of like whether people are managing their own keys or not, which is like also like a key management thing.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that that's exactly what the beginnings of Frontpage and Smoke Signal and other things are. And I think there was a really good line that I picked out from Tom right at the beginning. And I know from some discussions with Bluesky folks, that's the intent, is building a new internet. Eventually, there will be many people creating AT records that will be bigger and different than microblogging. That's my hope. Paul, go for it.
I'll just chime in that the PLC is the one thing that is architecturally resistant to having multiple different providers. The other pieces, the personal data server, the relay, the app view, those are all things that we're actually quite keen for more people to be operating. The way that the PDS is designed is specifically meant to make it easy to move between providers on that. That's what the whole account portability aspect is about. So it's not an undoable situation when it comes to the actual personal hosting. It's actually designed to the extent that you could adversarially migrate. So if the Bluesky PDS was not participating, you can actually force the migration without the PDS being involved, which is also good if it goes down, which is one of the patterns that happens in the Fediverse sometimes, is the providers shut down and then users need a way to persist their identities. So a lot of, again, I think actually Boris has it right that stuff like Frontpage is making forward progress on there being other forms of infrastructure that are running, because this is now alternative implementations that are getting going. Regarding PLC, the requirements for a good DID provider are, from our perspective, are pretty tough to hit. There's a lot of things you have to do right. Whenever we were working on the DID system, I read every DID spec for every DID method. There's over 100, and I opened up every one of them and looked at them, and none of them hit the properties that we needed. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a thing. We did not want to have to make our own. The most significant effort to do a blockchain-based DID method had taken off at one point in Europe and then crashed terribly due to scaling challenges. So it's actually quite hard to make something like that works. And so our kind of hope / expectation at this point is that DID PLC would move into an ICANN style of organization to be operated and actually use sort of social governance to, like organizational governance to maintain properties that are needed. if somebody else comes up with a better method, then we're also open to it. That's kind of, if there's any advantage to DIDs, it's that you can have other methods introduced into the system. And if anybody cooks something up that's actually distributed and maintains the properties that are needed, we're totally open to that. But it's also why we support did web, because that you can run on your own. So that's kind of the status of all that.
You want to roll into some updates? Brian, you wanted to mention that?
Oh, I was going to say, I think the issue Jenko was raising was like the identity, like the key management thing, like where are you going to manage your key? I think this is a hard thing. And I guess it's like, is the success metric that like every single, 90% of people are doing cryptographic key management if they don't know it? I'm not sure. There's that, like people that care a lot have an option. Like if you're a celebrity or a journalist or someone who's like under higher risk and really cares about their account, like at any time you can seize control of your identity. That's kind of the key thing. There's definitely some space for better tooling for people to add. Like someone, Stir4D, is working on some tooling to help you manage your own PLC key in a password manager or offline on your laptop. There's definitely space for people doing things like Shemmer key, Shemmer friend sharing. So you like embed your keys with your friends so you can recover from people that you trust. There's definitely space for something like kind of like an escrow service that you would pay for that would hold on to your identity keys on your behalf. Like if you have a lawyer, you could give your lawyer your keys. Those are all friction, right? Like that's not super easy. I think there's a dream that we can make it totally automated in the app where you hold keys like in an enclave on your phone, but that's like a whole project.
Well, actually, there's an interesting history with that, which is that up until August of 2022, so for the first 9-ish months of the protocol development, we did client-side key management. So for quite a long time, the expectation would be that we did key sync between devices and that writes were prepared on device and then sent up to the PDS. And we ended up realizing that was just way too complex and way too much friction, and key management is not well solved. So we ditched that. And what we do now is we have 2 keys. There's the signing key, which actually handles most of your transactions, but then there's the recovery key. And the recovery key is how you can do that adversarial movement between a PDS, because your signing key is controlled by the PDS, but your recovery key has an override power, and you can just paper wallet that thing. And that's how we ended up squaring that. So just essentially reduce the number of crypto operations that the paper key or whatever the personally controlled key requires. That's how we try to square that, which reduces the importance of the signing key significantly.
Lawrence.
Hey, thanks. I have a bit of a similar question that Nicholas also posted in chat about like how do you think about governance of lexicon definitions? Like you've now defined certain lexicons for like, and at some point there's going to be interoperability issues. Like I wrote about that stuff about the Fediverse and it's messy as fuck. It's also really funny, by the way. But like, is this like, I have actually 2 questions. Like, A, are you thinking about it in what way? And B, also, like, is this even something you're interested in as a developer, or to be like, have conversations about lexicon governance? Or would you wish, like, hey, that's somebody else, we can just take this lexicon and just not think about it?
The first thing that comes to mind is that the lexicon system feels like it sits in some uncanny valley situation right now, where it's a schema definition that's not entirely enforced on, or it's not enforced on many layers in the stack. And this like really confused us at the beginning, because we were looking at the lexicons and we were like, these are cool schemas, but it just feels like basically a client side thing that exists here. But maybe the plans are in the future to make it enforceable on some other layers. I think there needs to be some way that we need to. I don't know if we can solve the problem. I think maybe it just needs to be your lexicons are your API perhaps, and breaking changes are bad. But you need some way to enforce the ownership, I think, if you want to do that.
I think exactly this. Very few people understand how to do governance. I could stop there. And there's economic power and there's a bunch of other things like that. We've had a lot of theories of what it might mean to have shared schemas. And atproto seems to be one of the first systems where it's like, oh, okay, now we have to figure it out. And I think that's ahead of us. And I think the techno-social aspects, the socio aspects are in fact harder, right? How do we do prisoner's dilemma of someone else deciding to do a Hacker News clone, but deciding to use their own lexicon? And I think that literally with calls like this, we can start by going, how do we converge while we're still very, very tiny, and bake it into the way that we all work as developers and users?
That's something I've been thinking about, is that the who actually owns the idea of microblogging on atproto, or who owns the idea of a link, like a front page link on atproto. If somebody else wanted to kind of explore that space, would they use the same lexicon, or would they use a different lexicon? If I wanted to build a slightly different microblogging experience, would I converge on the app Bluesky type of post, or would I create my own? It's quite confusing.
Or extensibility.
Mm.
Yeah. We're slightly after 10, and I want to leave time for other folks. Paul, do you want to take us? I'll do one last round. Any burning thing for Tom and the front page team?
No, I just want to say that as a fellow developer in this sort of Wild West, it's really fun, and it's been fantastic to be able to count on you and rely on you. And Smoke Signal OAuth would have not been live if you hadn't gone, hey, Nick, you're doing this wrong, and helping me out. So thanks, man.
Amazing. And yeah, we're hosting, so that's Nick, who's the creator of Smoke Signal. And we're doing this again next week. So if you haven't already registered, you can register for that. Paul, you want to give us a little, and do you want it on or off the record? We could stop recording. Either way.
Oh, on the
record,
fine.
Okay.
See if I regret that someday, but I think I'll be good. Yeah, it's really awesome seeing all y'all here, actually. I think we ought to start to have maybe more of these sorts of things, especially not just talks, but actually I'd like to get into some kind of unconference style of things where we just start to talk about some of these things, because the list of things I'm about to say is way too much for us to even handle in a half an hour. So I'll keep it kind of quick. And try to just give a overview of some of the things that got touched on here and kind of where we directionally think they're going. So first of all, drain pipe and the fire hose. I actually dropped a comment in there. I love what you're doing with that. And I think maybe my biggest observation is just that we're looking at the exact same thing. The biggest question ultimately is going to be, what do we work into the relay interface and kind of make core protocol versus what do we expect to be downstream services like drain pipe that you created? So that's a pretty good conversation for us to get into. That we decided not to make any moves yet because we didn't have any really easy answers ready to go right now. So, but we're actively talking about it. So we'll probably want to talk with you more and everybody else in the near future about that. So that's a evolving target. Now, the read after write thing that you ran into, we're actually starting to get a much better answer around that. That actually comes hand in hand with OAuth. You kind of have it right already in that notion of doing two writes, one to your app view and one to the PDS. And the flow actually is going to become where the app view ends up being what you primarily, when you build an application, your app is just going to talk to the app view. And it's going to do an OAuth sign in to get the app view server will get a session with the PDS so that it can read and write. So whenever you create a new record, you'll route that through your app view. It can update its local tables and then send that message off to the PDS to do the write. And then it's going to get back revision information that it can track locally. Eventually that write will come back to you again through the fire hose. And if you've already processed it because you've tracked the revision of what you already did, you just, cool, I don't need to process it again. So that will end up really answering this question of read after write and not having that delayed effects problem that currently exists. and hopefully simplify the application model. We're going to be putting out like a how to build an app on. I've got like a whole tutorial written that'll cover a lot of this and really clarify it. But you came exceedingly close with what you did, and I'm really impressed by that because we did not make that easy. So that's awesome. A couple of great things came up about interop that all I'll say is I want to talk more about this. The question about the canonical URLs for like the comment section is something that we're keen to figure out. All of the questions about lexicon governance and like how interop is going to get navigated between applications so that they can interpret each other's data is just going to be a big conversation that we all engage in, I think, collectively. Quick note on rich text. I have come to really hate the slice-based approach that we took, the indexing thing. It's so hard to work with. And you can't like write, like if you're just trying to like programmatically create rich text, you're sitting there and counting characters to create the slices. It's just not super tenable. There were some reasons why we did that, but I have a proposal for a new form of rich text that maybe would be a good time to press the gas since y'all are looking at doing more rich text stuff. Yeah, I mean, eventually the rich text, what format that eventually does become is just an array of objects, like whenever the rich text API in our SDK processes all those slices, it produces an array form of the slices, and I kind of think that's just what the native format should be. It's just that Lexicon couldn't understand that, so I think we just need to make rich text a Lexicon native type. So we're gonna get into that, and then lastly, with Lexicon itself, the question about like somebody brought up the question about the registry. Also, like how does it work? Like what's the function of it in terms of like where it gets enforced, things like that. You have it correct right now that it's kind of a client-side thing. Lexicon is really there just to help, right? It's not meant to force anybody into anything. The whole reason it exists is because it is actually to just like document more than anything and like help make it easier to avoid mistakes, and give people like tools for knowing what other developers are doing without having to talk to developers directly every time. At a previous I worked on Secure Scuttlebutt, and we tried to do it all by convention, and you had no idea how to predict the effects that changes would have on other people's clients, so you wound up in this terrible lowest common denominator thing. Unfortunately, Lexicon makes it scary right now, and we need to find a way to make it less scary. But by and large, that is one thing I want to like impress, is that it's really a helping tool. It's not a strict system. And then, yeah, we're talking about doing a registry model where you actually just publish the schemas on at-protocol repositories, as in like the repositories that are mapped to the domain, you know, so like under app.bskies or bsky.apps repo, we would publish all the app.bsky schemas, which would be really cool because then you can have like package management tools that are just app views. Right, and so we're actually getting to dog food, the decentralized model for the distribution of lexicons. So then you have multiple different competing package managers for the lexicons, and like start to have a website that like acts as a registry, drawing in from all the different things and showing them. So yes, and that actually would mean that you could do runtime resolution of lexicons, and then when you get into OAuth, you start to ask questions about how you describe the permissions. And yeah, I gotta see what your reaction there, Boris, because there's a little bit of brittleness around expecting that you're going to, in the runtime system, be able to resolve the lexicons. But again, if you consider it to be an optional thing, that might make it possible for us to say like, oh, you're asking for Bluesky posts, not you're asking for app.bsky.star, right? So there's a descriptive. Yeah, again, the runtime resolution, there's a reason we haven't done it so far. We're going to be cautious about it. We don't want the system to become brittle. XML had a terrible problem with runtime resolution of definitions. And so we have to be kind of mindful about when we're actually using it.
I think I'm just going like, oh God, because this is the path that we're in, right? But I think one of the things that I'm really starting to settle down into is we really haven't had really solid protocol rollout in a really long time, and just even having the at protocol namespace lets at producers and consumers start figuring out what we do in that space, which will initially be fairly sandboxy and then standardize over time, right? So, you know, like right now is the time to try these things before it gets more solidified, right? So it sounds awesome. Sounds awesome. Yeah. Amazing. Any final comments that people want to say? Let's just say thanks again to Tom and the Unravel team. Thanks everyone for coming. This is awesome. I will post video next week, same time. I'm scheduling for the week after. I'm asking Lawrence to come on. I'm gonna figure out when we do this. I'll ask folks for feedback and send links to everyone who's subscribed to the Luma. Let's wave and we'll stop the recording.